We are joined on the Mixed Morning Show by Jennifer Frank. Good morning, Jennifer.
Good morning, Corny. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you on my show because we chose this book. The Worm Family has its picture taken. We chose this as one of the books that we are going to read to hundreds of kids across the Southeast for I Love to Read Month.
So exciting.
And then I found out that I got to talk to the person whose mind this came out of. And here you are.
It is kind of crazy how that works, how this comes out of someone's mind, right?
Yep.
And then it really becomes it's more than just my mind by the time it comes to you, because it's my mind, it's the illustrator's mind, it's the editor's mind, it's the person who designs the pages mind. And then it really brings my words to life in a way that I never thought could be possible.
And then the mind of the reader as they are imagining their own
sure.
part of the story as well. We're going to get to the
part.
We're going to get to the specific story in just a second, but what are some of your early influences of writing kids' books? How did this get started for you?
So I grew up in a family that read to me all the time. My parents read stories to me every night. My dad would make up crazy voices to Horton Hatches the Egg, and that's a really big, influence in my life. And Bread and Jam for Francis and Blueberries for Sal and those sort of classic books. And my mother then would also make up stories for me at night before I would go to bed. And so we were a family that sometimes actually quoted children's books at the dinner table the way you might quote a movie,
Wow.
So my dad would say, I said what I meant and I meant what I said, and elephant's faithful 100%. And he had, so he had the voices. We're a little weird, but it did instill in me a love of picture books. And then when I had my own kids, I just started making up stories for them. I think sort of just because that's what I always knew. And then when I wrote them down, I thought, oh, I might have something here. Perhaps I could, see if I could get this published. But that was a long road and a long journey. Much longer than I anticipated and expected, but it's well worth it.
So this is your first published book, correct?
It is, yes.
So what was that journey like? What was that journey like to get a book published?
So, like I said, I wrote the books. It's interesting when I go talk to children in schools, what I tell them is I show them a picture of my kids when I wrote the book, and they were like a baby, 3 and 5. I have 3 girls, and now they are 16, almost 20, and 22. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of how long my journey was. So I wrote the books for my kids because they were struggling with some feelings of being different. And then I went to join the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and I went to conferences, but I was also working and raising my family. And it wasn't until I got an agent that my book finally reached an editor's desk and was able to have that yay or nay. And thankfully, Ann Schwartz at Random House, Ann Schwartz Books, fell in love with it. And then David Ezra Stein also fell in love with it, which is really another extra blessing because he's incredible. And now we have the Worm Family has its picture taken out in the world for folks to enjoy.
Oh, I love that. That is
Only
so
15
good.
years later.
An overnight success. Over how many years? Oh, that is good. I love it because you're talking about your dad creating these characters by always doing voices and giving life to these characters. Your mom making up stories. It's like, you had book writing class in your house every day with mom and dad. Like, what an incredible influence.
Yeah, I really did. I'm very lucky in that way. And I hope my kids also have that same feeling. But really, I think stories are such an important way for kids to learn about the world. So it's just my joy to be able to sort of add my little piece to that.
Yeah. So this story is about being your unique self. And they are unique. They're a worm family.
Mm-hmm.
They're a worm family. And they are unique. And they are trying in this book to be like others because they're not satisfied with who they are. So what brought on this theme of being uniquely you?
So when I wrote this book, I was, like I said, I was telling the story initially when I wrote it, I was telling this to my children who were 3 and 5 at the time. And had just been diagnosed with something called celiac disease, which is an autoimmune disorder, which means you can't have wheat or gluten. And at that time, which was quite some time ago, there weren't so many gluten-free foods available, and it just wasn't as well known. And going to school, they always had parties where kids would bring in cupcakes that my kids couldn't eat. They would go to friends' houses where they couldn't have a snack. They would go to birthday parties where they had to bring their own pizza. So they were feeling different, and they weren't feeling so great about being different. And so I was trying to come up with different stories to help them understand everyone's different, right? And that what we really need to do is just appreciate what makes each of us unique and special. And then we can be happy for our friends for what makes them special, and also be happy with what makes us special. So that was sort of my motherly, ultimately my motherly goal in making up these stories. But of course, when you make up a story, it has to be fun, it has to be funny, it has to be entertaining. It can't just be a lesson.
No,
because
that's boring.
Exactly. So I'm kind of crazy, and that's where my mind went with worms.
I love this. Growing up with the name Corny, yes, that is my real name.
That's
I
awesome.
hated having, it's short for Cornelius, but I hated having that name because it was weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I embrace the uniqueness of being corny, and it's who I am. And I try to tell kids about that too. Like, embrace who you are, because you are unique, you're powerful, you're wonderful. And that's why I love this book. That's why I chose this book to read to the kids, because it is such a great lesson. And I know your answer already, but I'm going to ask you, in your opinion, stories for kids, is this just entertainment?
You do know my answer already. I mean, first and foremost, I think it needs to be entertaining, right? I think that there needs to be a reason and a joy that's brought to opening those pages, and you want to read them, and then you want to reread them, right? But I definitely think there's more to a book than that. And exactly sort of what you're saying, this windows and mirrors thing, which is a big theme in children's literacy right now, which is kids being able to see themselves in books and being able to see into the lives of others in books, right? So you're learning about hard things in a way that makes it easier, because you're able to have these conversations with adults that are safe and not really about what you're talking about, right? So if your parents were talking to you about your name and you feeling different, they might have read this book with you and said, oh, look how Emma is, trying to fit in and be something else. But look at that. In the end, she ended up realizing that it was better to be herself, and she ended up really liking who she was. So you can talk about it without talking about it.
Yep.
And I think that that's really important. And I think to raise compassionate and caring individuals, those windows and mirrors are so, so important. And it's the best books that have both, where kids can see a little bit of a glimpse of themselves and other people. So
I love that concept of mirrors and windows. I'm going to
yeah.
use that. I'm going to steal that.
Yes, you should. It's out there. It's out there everywhere in the sort of whole world of literacy.
Yeah.
It's a really big
I
topic.
love that. Yeah, because in every story you read, you either see yourself in the character a little bit, or you see into the life of someone else,
Mm-hmm.
and you can see a situation in through a different set of eyes. I think that's
Right.
fantastic. So what's your next project? Is there going to be a Worm Family series? What's happening from
Wouldn't
here?
that be great from
Yes.
your lips, right? I would love that. That really depends on the publisher and if enough books sell. So what you're doing can help make that happen. I've already written it, so we'll see if it actually comes to life. I also am working on a number of other stories, similar in the same sort of vein as this one, where again, I believe that stories should be both entertaining and also have some sort of component where kids are going to be learning something from it, but not without them knowing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in a fun and funny way. So I hope to have more books in the future.
Yeah.
It's a hard industry.
Well, if all of a sudden in one of your future books there's a character who has a name Corny that he doesn't like his name and feels silly, I'll know where you got the idea.
Have you read the book Chrysanthemum?
Chrysanthemum, no.
Okay, well, that's your book, because it's about a mouse, Kevin Henkes. I love Kevin Henkes. He's another one of my sort of, my idols. But he wrote a book called Chrysanthemum, and she loves her name. She thinks it's perfectly perfect or something like that. And then when she gets to school, people make fun of her because her name's too long and her name's a flower and all these things. And then I'll spoil the book for you. But
Yeah,
anyway,
no
in the end,
spoilers.
a teacher comes in and helps make it so that she realizes, and the teacher's name is Delphinium Twinkle, which is another flower name. And is pregnant, and she's going to name her baby Chrysanthemum, and all the kids are like, "Ooh!" So it's about appreciating your name, and so it's a brilliant book.
Okay, I am definitely going to check that one out. I love
Yeah,
that.
you would
And you,
like it.
and you know, the thing is too, I am not a good reader. As a matter of fact, I have a little bit of a reading impediment where I'm not dyslexic, but when I read, my eyes get ahead of my mind, or like they're not always lined up. So I stumble when I read. So
Mm-hmm.
even when I go to read for kids, I always ask them, who loves reading? And they put up there, and who kind of likes reading? Okay, be honest, who hates reading? And there's always like probably a third of the kids are going to raise their hands. And I tell them, I would have raised my hand the same time as you kids at the end that didn't like reading. And but now, like, knowing that you can just like take a book like this and tell a story, don't worry about whether you stumble on words or you got to start
Absolutely.
again, or be like, it doesn't matter, right? And just
Absolutely.
embracing who you are. And I think that gives kids power. And I think reading books like this about being uniquely you,
Mm-hmm.
even though you're just a worm, like you have no arms, you don't have big
Right.
poofy
Can't
hair,
even give a hug at the end.
you can't give a hug, like,
Yeah.
but you're a unique worm. And I won't spoil the ending because we're gonna put the video up of the reading of the worm family takes or has its picture taken. But I want to thank you for writing this book. I think this is fantastic, and we're going to read this book in front of hundreds of kids throughout the Southeast. What would you like to say as the author of this book? What would you like to say to the hundreds of kids who are going to hear this story in February?
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to say keep reading. Even if it's a little bit hard, keep reading, because it really does open worlds that you might not otherwise have access to in your own community. And second, I would say something that I write on every book that I sign, which is you are perfectly perfect just as you are. And you should embrace that and feel good about that and find what makes you unique. And then once you do that, find what other people makes other people unique and celebrate that with them, and go out together and make the world a better place.
I love that. Jennifer, you are spreading joy with your book. And I really appreciate you, and I appreciate this book. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun. I really appreciate it.